Eucom have never been clearer. For more than a year, Russia has waged a brutal, unprovoked war on Ukraine, inflicting terrible suffering on the people of Ukraine and threatening European stability. The Ukrainians have fought with incredible courage and skill to repel Russia's vicious assault, defending the same values and freedoms that we cherish. Ukraine has achieved some very notable successes, but there is hard fighting ahead and more to be done. Throughout this conflict, the NATO alliance has shown remarkable unity and resolve. A formidable coalition of our allies has joined together to provide military and humanitarian support to Ukraine and impose severe costs on Russia's economy. If Putin thought his war would drive a wedge between NATO and members and within the international community, he was badly mistaken. NATO unity has never been stronger, and many European nations are taking steps to invest greater proportions of their budgets and institutional energies to improve their military capabilities. Indeed, in a triumphant moment for NATO, Finland recently joined the alliance. This was an utter rejection of Russia's strategic goals, and I know the Finns will contribute significantly to the alliance, and I hope we will soon welcome Sweden as well. President Biden deserves great credit for marshaling these efforts. His administration continues to provide critical military equipment and training to Ukraine, including combat vehicles like Abrams tanks, Strykers, and Bradleys, as well as weapons like HIMARS, howitzers, Patriot air defense systems, and various types of ammunition. This equipment, in concert with contributions and training from across the alliance, has provided an important mix of capabilities to bolster Ukrainian effectiveness on the battlefield. Let there be no doubt, the United States will continue to help Ukraine succeed on the battlefield. America's assistance to Ukraine is also an investment in our own national security interest. Beyond repelling Putin, we know China is watching closely, and we must succeed. General Cavoli, the NATO alliance has made important progress in its ability to generate and maintain the collective force posture, operations, and investments necessary to deter Russian aggression against its members, and the United States has played a key role in those efforts. At the same time, the security environment in Europe has experienced a tectonic shift. I would like to know your views and plans for U.S. military activities and investments in the Eucom area of responsibility in light of these changes. General Van Ovost, Transcom is also playing a critical role in our support to Ukraine. American troops continue to operate forward logistics centers to receive, identify, and transport the majority of security aid intended for Ukraine and across and from the international community. This has been an enormous task, executed with impressive skill on little notice. I would appreciate an update on these efforts and any lessons learned that you may have to share. Keeping an eye to the future and the pacing threat of China, an important reality of we are learning is that any potential adversary is going to attack our logistics support system. This idea of contested logistics will include obvious threats to our forward bases, as well as the aircraft and ships that resupply those bases. But it could also include cyber attacks against information technology systems that support our deployments, both government and commercial, and possible kinetic attacks against ports and airfields supporting our deployments. I am concerned that our thinking about logistics during conflict has too often defaulted to our uncontested military dominance since World War II. We have always owned the sea and airlines of communication and have only had to worry about logistics efficiency, not effectiveness. General Van Ovost, I would like to know what steps Transcom is taking to prepare for such threats to our logistics and how the military services can alter their acquisition programs to take these concerns into account. I thank you again to our witnesses, and I look forward to your testimonies. As a reminder for my colleagues, at the conclusion of the open session of this hearing, we will recess for the joint session of Congress. We will then reconvene for the closed session at 12:30 p.m. in room SVC 217. We are committed to allowing all of our colleagues to ask questions, so if the assembly time arrives, we'll continue in the open session until everyone has an opportunity to do so. In lieu of Senator Wicker's arrival shortly, I will ask General Cavoli to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Reed, to Ranking Member Wicker, of course, as well. Distinguished members of the committee, it's a privilege to testify before you today and in many cases to see you again. On behalf of the men, women, and the families of U.S. Eucom, first of all, I thank you for your steadfast support to their mission, to their safety, and to their well-being. I'd also like to recognize and thank my command senior enlisted leader, CSM Rob Abernathy, sitting behind me here, who accompanied me here today. He is representing our non-commissioned officers, our enlisted soldiers, and our families who remain America's asymmetric advantage against any adversary. So thank you, Rob, for being here. I'm very pleased to appear today beside my good friend and colleague, Jackie Van Ovost, whose U.S. Transportation Command is unlike anything else on the globe and who works miracles every day. Thank you, Jackie, to your whole command. So this is, as the chairman noted, an unprecedented time in Euro-Atlantic area. 14 months ago, Russia's illegal, unprovoked invasion of Ukraine dramatically shifted perceptions of European stability and our broader global security. It galvanized European governments' resolve. Last year's NATO summit in Madrid was a turning point for the alliance. Nations committed to a new strategic concept that put collective territorial defense at the top of the alliance task list for the first time in 35 years. And for the first time since the Cold War, it set into motion a series of efforts that will profoundly change the military structure and activities of NATO. We have been creating new plans. That is, Allied Command Operations has been creating new plans for the general defense of the alliance. And these will drive higher levels of readiness and more targeted national defense investments, especially on the part of our allies. Nations agreed to accelerate defense spending increases, to establish enhanced force posture on the eastern flank of NATO, to turn unprecedented numbers of troops and weapons over to NATO command and control, and critically, to bring 2 new members into the alliance. Happy to note, as the chairman did, that Finland has already joined, and we hope soon to see Sweden as a member as well. Over time, these efforts inside the alliance will lead to significantly increased European military capabilities and will continue to deter aggression against the alliance. That deterrent posture has allowed us to work intensively in the past year or so to assist Ukraine. In the past year, thanks to your support, U.S. donations of arms, ammunition, equipment, vehicles, and supplies have enabled Ukraine to halt Russia's invasion. We have not been alone in this effort. The DoD and U.S. Eucom lead an international effort represented by the 50-plus member UDCG, Ukraine Donors Contact Group. We have an effort together to identify, transport, and deliver equipment and ammunition to Ukraine, along with the training to use that equipment in combat. This material support and the training provided by international donors has been huge and fundamental to the Ukrainian military's success so far. Over the winter, our coalition has enabled the Ukrainian military to generate the military capabilities necessary to defend and regain parts of their sovereign territory. We're confident our Ukrainian partners are good stewards of donated aid. Our embassy team in Kyiv, led by Brigadier General Garrick Harmon, and the Security Assistance Group in Ukraine, located in Germany, work diligently to monitor and keep a close eye on all lethal aid to ensure it is getting to and staying in the right hands. Although we remain optimistic for Ukraine's future and sovereignty, this war is far from over. Russia will remain an acute threat to Euro-Atlantic security, and the National Defense Strategy rightly calls our attention to that. But Russia's not the only problem in Europe. The People's Republic of China continues to increase its access and influence in our theater, and its activities pose risk to U.S., allied, and partner interests. The PRC uses foreign direct investment, government-backed business ventures, and loans to gain access to technology and to gain control over vital European infrastructure and transportation routes. Finally, Europe continues to face transnational challenges as well, such as violent extremist organizations, uncontrolled migration, organized crime, and even climate change. Eucom trains and cooperates with allies and partners to help counter those challenges as well. Our strategic approach fortifies our allies and our partners. It strengthens alliance interoperability and enhances our collective combat capability, which deters our adversaries. And as always, should deterrence fail, U.S. Eucom, alongside our allies and partners, is ready to fight and win. Your continued support for our efforts The authorities and the funding you give us are critical to our ability to do this. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me here today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, General Cavoli. General Van Ovost, your statement, please.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, distinguished members of the committee, good morning. It's my honor to join you today with my senior enlisted leader, Fleet Master Chief Donald Myrick, to represent the men and women of the United States Transportation Command as we defend the nation, take care of our people, and succeed through teamwork. I'm extremely proud of our team of logistics professionals who lead the Joint Deployment and Distribution Enterprise, continually exceed expectations, and ensure hope, deterrence, and victory are assured as we contribute to our nation's defense. From competition to crisis, the entire enterprise proudly delivers for our nation, our allies, and our partners. We know our success in the European theater and beyond would not be possible without the steadfast support of this committee and the whole of Congress. To maintain the unrivaled strategic advantage to project and sustain the joint force over global distances through natural disasters, pandemics, conflicts, peace, and war, while defending our homeland, we must preserve our logistical dominance. Our organic fleet, along with our commercial transportation partners, must continue to present credible deterrence and requires proactive efforts to recapitalize and modernize. My highest concerns lie in reductions in capacity and readiness in both sea lift and air refueling. We are a generation late in recapitalizing a ready sea lift fleet to meet our national objectives. The average age of our 44 roll-on, roll-off ships we use to surge from the continental United States is 44 years old. In fact, 17 of the 44 ships are 50 years or older. Transcom supports the Navy's strategy to acquire used sea lift vessels from the commercial market and further requests to provide Secretary of Defense discretionary authority to purchase foreign-built used ships under favorable market conditions without limitation on number. I greatly appreciate your support for stabilized funding towards our sea lift recapitalization effort, and I'm heartened by the current progress on the first 5 ships. We've also taken steps to address the department's shortfall in meeting wartime fuel delivery demands and the vulnerable position of continued reliance on the use of foreign flag, foreign crewed tanker vessels. We are working with MARAD to implement the Tanker Security Program, which will provide assured access to U.S. flag tankers and begin to reduce risk in sea lift tanker capacity. In addition to the Tanker Security Program, we fully support the Maritime Security Program, the Jones Act, and cargo preference laws that all work together to ensure we have the necessary U.S. flag capability and U.S. mariners during peacetime and ready to move sensitive defense materials during a national emergency. In every domain, American workers are critical to the joint force transportation and logistics. In particular, maritime stakeholders have been experiencing challenges with recruiting and retaining mariners. We support MARAD and industry efforts to identify strategies that address the mariner shortage and ensure their readiness. In the air refueling fleet is the backbone of rapid global mobility and is our most stressed capability. Transcom supports the Air Force's continued efforts towards focused modernization of the fleet, uninterrupted tanker recapitalization, and accelerated pursuit of the next-generation air refueling system to ensure our capacity and readiness remains credible to cover simultaneous global requirements. Future operations will also require high degrees of battle space awareness and leveraging data to align scarce mobility resources with the greatest strategic needs. Integration into battle networks, resourcing cryptographic modernization, cybersecurity, and ensuring resilient positioning, navigation, and timing are among my top priorities. Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act expires at the end of this year, which provides essential and irreplaceable insights on the activities of critical foreign targets. The loss of this authority, or renewal in diminished or unusable form, would profoundly damage the department's ability to see and mitigate some of the most profound threats against the United States and our allies and partners. Therefore, reauthorization is a matter of utmost priority. Just as we are engaged globally in our flagship transformational effort, the Global Household Goods Contract will bring accountability that does not exist in the current program of dispersed vendors. We owe it to our members and their families to ensure that they have the very best relocation experience that we can provide. I am honored to join General Cavoli today, where we are in lockstep to provide critical aid to enable Ukraine's national defense that in turn delivers success for the United States, our allies, and our nation. I would like to thank you once again for your leadership and for the support you provide our workforce, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, General Van Ovost. Senator Wicker has suggested that we proceed with questioning, and when he's called upon, he'll have an opportunity to submit his statement and also to ask his question. So let me begin. Both General Ovost and Van Ovost and General Cavoli have absolutely critical positions. In fact, General Cavoli, the Ukrainian situation is the most pressing military situation in the world at the moment. Unfortunately, here in the Senate, we've reached an impasse in terms of the promotion of non-controversial general officers on a routine basis, usually by unanimous consent. Could you indicate what effects this will have on your operational capacity, but also on the morale and personal dynamics of families?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes, in an operational sense, if I have officers who are scheduled to retire, general officers who are scheduled to retire, and do so, but I don't have somebody to replace them, I'll suffer a gap in that. Some of those are in fairly critical positions right now. For example, the chairman's military representative to the military committee, General John Diedrich, is scheduled to retire this summer. His replacement hasn't been confirmed, so would have a gap in the chairman's representation at that rank at the military committee in NATO, which in my U.S. role is a vital connection between me and the chairman to influence activities in NATO. And in my role as SACU, of course, it's very useful to have a line to the U.S. military representative. So that's one example, sir.
Well, thank you. And General Ovost, your perceptions?
Thank you, Chairman. Besides any operational impacts from not being able to rotate general officers into positions of significant responsibility, the United States Transportation Command is responsible for moving 311,000 families every year around the globe. It's important to continue these movements so that the children can be enrolled in schools, they can find adequate housing, and ensure that they are ready to succeed in their new responsibilities. So these delays add additional stress to our military families who already sacrifice enough.
Thank you very much, General Ovost, Van Ovost. General Cavoli, there's been some discussion about the relative contributions of NATO countries and other countries to this fight. If we look simply at the dimension of military equipment, military supplies, that's one measure. But overall, in terms of accepting refugees, in terms of supporting those refugees, the Kiel Institute has analyzed that total input and indicates that the U.S. was ranked 12th in terms of the amount of GDP. The 11 preceding countries are European countries. It raises the question of how important these contributions are to the battlefield, even though they don't represent military equipment or military advice.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for the opportunity to comment on this topic. So first of all, the United States can and should be extremely proud of the quantity of aid that we've given and the leadership role we've taken. I think that's absolutely imperative to note up front. And in gross numbers, I think it's very fair by whichever mode of calculation we arrive at a gross number. The U.S. clearly is the leader. In terms of proportion, though, you're right. I mean, more than half a dozen allies have given a greater share of their GDP in military aid to the Ukrainians. I can't speak to all the other types of aid, but maybe I can give a little bit of a couple of illustrations. 514 tanks have been given by the West to the Ukrainians in the past few months. None of them have come from the United States yet. Our Abrams won't get there until later in the year. 16 mid-level or high-level air defense systems have been given. 2 of those were given by the United States. So there are some genuine donations. More than a third of our allies have given over half of their capacity in a given category to the Ukrainians. I'd be reluctant to be really precise in public, but I'd be delighted to be precise in closed session later today, if you'd like, sir. And then finally, in non-military ways, there's a lot going on. Our allies have treated or are treating about 2,400 wounded, grievously wounded Ukrainians in their hospitals, largely in their national defense systems, national health systems. We have treated 4 at Landstuhl. So there are some genuine contributions being made, sir.
Well, thank you very much, General. Let me recognize Senator Wicker. Thank you very much, both.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do ask unanimous consent that my opening statement be included after yours in the record.
Without objection.
And I thank the chairman for bringing up the point about burden sharing. And I think it's helpful to reemphasize the 5 million Ukrainian refugees that are being cared for by Europeans at some considerable cost, 1.5 million in Poland, 920,000 in Germany, 177,000 in the Baltic states, 500,000 in the Czech Republic. And so I'm glad to see the chair bring that up in his first round of questioning. I think one thing that could really harm public opinion here in the United States would be if we found that there was some corruption and siphoning off of money or weapons sold or donated by the United States. And I had a chance to ask you about that earlier, but would you give us your take and any assurance that you could give us that our friends who are actually carrying the fight in Ukraine are mindful of this possibility and how serious it would be if it were to occur?
Thank you, Senator. Of course, first of all, just with the general statement, my colleagues, my interlocutors in Ukraine assure me that they understand how important this issue is to the American people, and I believe sincerely so. But as usual, military people put into action systems to try to verify things. So we're doing enhanced end-use monitoring, and if you would permit me, I'd like to describe that for you for a second.
Please do, yes.
The first thing we do is whenever we receive U.S. equipment that's going to go into the country, it comes through one of a couple of ports of entry. The main one is in southeastern Poland, and a number of the members have visited there. At that location, we inventory everything by serial number so that we know exactly what's going into the country. A couple of months ago, about 6 months ago, we gave the Ukrainian military a NATO standard logistics tracking software system called LogFast. It's what we use to track our own system. So we ingest all of that inventory into LogFast, and then the Ukrainians use that to track and to distribute their equipment around the country, and we have access to that in real time. So that helps us to a certain degree. But then, of course, once you get inside the country, we have a responsibility to go lay eyes on things and check them. And that enhanced end-use monitoring is done by the Defense Attaché Office in Kiev, led by Brigadier General Garrick Harmon. They go out to sites and they inspect. They went to Odessa yesterday to inspect and to inventory, and they'll go to another location next week as well. When they can't get to a location, they have barcodes placed on things, and Ukrainians self-report by clicking on the barcode, and then we ingest that information into LogFast so we can track it as well.
Okay, perhaps you could supplement that answer on the record, but you have confidence that there are safeguards for our weapons and donations.
Yes, I do, Senator.
Yeah. General Van Ovost, we're not where we need to be at all in the Pacific if conflict breaks out there, aren't we?
Senator, we are not yet fully set in posture in the Indo-Pacific, I would agree.
And you mentioned on page 15 of your testimony, in particular, the importance of the tanker security program, and in your verbal testimony, you mentioned the importance of the Jones Act. Now, we're aware that in some circumstances, the consumers pay more because of the Jones Act. But in a previous conversation with you, you were, I believe, very compelling in explaining why the Jones Act is so important to our national security in case conflict breaks out. So if I might, Mr. Chairman, let General Van Ovost expand on that.
Certainly, Senator, thank you. The United States, we only have 85 U.S. flagged, U.S. crewed ships in international trade right now, which we have less than 2% of the foreign trade that passes using U.S. flagged, U.S. crewed ships. In other words, 98% foreign flagged. It's not enough for our national security. So we have actually already reserve force because there's not enough U.S. flagged, U.S. crewed shipping. So it's very important that we have maritime security program, tanker security program, cargo preference laws, and the Jones Act to ensure that we keep U.S. flagged, U.S. crewed vessels available for our national security needs.
And what if we didn't have those?
Senator, if we didn't have those, we perhaps would have to grow our organic fleet of sea lift ships, requiring 100% of the burden being on the U.S. military.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member, Senator Fisher, please.
Shaheen.
Shaheen, I am.
You know, I know we all look alike, but
No, Roger does not look at all like, it's just.
Like a chairman, perhaps?
No, it's just, I apologize. It's early and my coffee has not yet taken hold. Forgive me. Senator Shaheen of New Hampshire.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, General Cavoli and General Van Ovost, for being here this morning and for your service. General Van Ovost, I would like to begin with you because in your opening statement you talked about the stressed capacity of our air refueling and the importance of that. And I know we've been delighted to host you at the former Pease Air Force Base, where Pease Air National Guard 157th Air Refueling Wing has KC-46 tankers to do refueling. But can you talk about, when you talked about the stress capacity, how important the KC-46 is and what else we need to do in order to address our needs?
Senator, thank you. As I mentioned, our ability to project and sustain the force, the foundation of that is our air refueling capability. It makes us a global superpower. So it's really critical that we continue to recapitalize the KC-135s and KC-10s with KC-46. So I appreciate this committee's support in continuing that recap and thinking about the next generation air refueling. As far as the KC-46, it brings new capabilities to the fight, capabilities we have not had previously. That aircraft is what I call connected to the battle space. It can see battle space maneuvers, and it can assist the joint force in ways that we haven't even fully explored yet. So it's a force multiplier. It can do probe and drogue as well as boom refueling. And it can receive and it can take on gas in flight. So it's a multi-capable airplane, and we intend to use it that way to augment the joint force.
Thank you. You also talked about the importance of Section 702 in terms of intelligence gathering. Senator Budd and I were with a number of other senators in Latin America a couple of weeks ago, and at every stop we heard about the importance of reauthorizing 702. Can you and General Cavoli both speak to what that allows us to do when we don't have people on the ground in terms of collecting information that we need?
As Senator, signals intelligence is critical to my ability to understand the threats around the world, where they're moving to, what their intentions are, and how we can mitigate those threats. So that's it for the open session. Happy to expound in the classified section.
Thank you.
Senator, of course, a full answer is best done in closed session. but I can assure you that an enormous amount of the intelligence that I rely on in the current crisis is derived from the authorities under 702.
Thank you. Thank you both. I think, General Cavoli, this question is probably for you because we see Iran continuing to supply Russia with critical support in this war against Ukraine. There are reports now that Iran is providing artillery and ammunition to Ukraine as well as drones. Has that been confirmed, and how are we working with our counterparts in CENTCOM to track and respond to that Iranian equipment? And also, are we seeing other countries provide weapons and ammunition to Russia as well?
First, more broadly, Senator, we see other countries considering it. We see precious few actually doing it right now, and we're gratified by that, but it's because of significant efforts on the part of the United States and our allies to discourage them. And you've seen some of that in the open press. We can discuss some more in closed session. With regard to the Iranian threat specifically, we have seen, and the Ukrainians have reported to us, the presence of Iranian drones especially. That's been pretty well covered in open sources, but I can go into some details in closed session with you if you'd like. I am in significant contact with my good friend and colleague Eric Corella in Central Command, and some of the things we're thinking about in terms of handling this situation, I can address with you in closed session as well, if you'll permit me.
Well, thank you, and you may want to address this in closed session, but do we think they have an unlimited supply of the weapons that they're providing to Russia, or are we seeing challenges within their industrial base?
They have a significant supply, but it's certainly not unlimited, ma'am.
Thank you. And I have only a little time left, but could you both of you speak to the importance of the air defender exercises that NATO is going to be doing? Again, I'm pleased that the 157th from New Hampshire is going to participate in those, but how important are those? I understand it's the biggest exercise, that air exercise NATO's done.
If I could start as the commander of Allied Command Operations, Senator, extremely important. Air defense is one of the things that most of the nations in the alliance are challenged on in terms of capacity. And then the integration is something that has to be done and repetitively exercised constantly because systems change and the technology gets updated and the software, and then you got to bring it back together. These are absolutely vital exercises.
And our teams are fully engaged. This is a critical exercise for us for interoperability with our allies and partners, growing their capabilities, and including command and control.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Cavoli, what do you assess to be the impact of Russia's assertions that it would deploy tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, along with its handling over Iskander mobile short-range ballistic missiles to the Belarusian forces?
Senator, thank you for the question. As a military matter, I do not think that it is a particularly concerning development. And we can go into the specifics of that in closed session, of course. Therefore, I think it's mainly a gesture. And,
you think it's more sable rattling again?
I do. I think it's a gesture, and it's a gesture that we'll handle through our policy means, et cetera. And I have less to comment on in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Also, can you discuss what your demands are for both manned and unmanned ISR?
Yeah, absolutely, Senator. Of course, like all the combatant commanders, ISR is what we depend on, especially during peacetime, to maintain situational awareness. There is a demand for ISR, both manned and unmanned aerial ISR, that far exceeds the supply across the Department of Defense, and we're grateful when we get our share of it. Right now, it's extremely important for a variety of reasons. We can't do everything with other means. It's our ability to collect and analyze depends on using a layered approach with a variety of systems, and we depend on those. We're grateful for the advances that the services are making, from the Army with its new Artemis system, which has been doing great work in Europe for the last couple of years, to the Air Force's advances and to the Navy's P-8 program, all very valuable, ma'am.
And how do you believe the threats are going to change in Eucom in the coming decades? In your crystal ball, what do you see?
Do you mean in general, Senator?
In general.
Well, I think Russia is quite likely to remain the core security challenge in Europe for some years to come. Their military has suffered significant losses in this conflict, but they've mainly been in the ground domain. The Air Force, the tactical Air Force, has lost about 80 fighters and fighter bombers, but they have more than 1,000 of them left. The long-range aviation has not been touched. The Navy has barely been touched, lost a ship or two. The strategic nuclear forces, the cyber, the space have not been touched. So I think Russia will continue to be the core security challenge. But there are others. China is gaining influence, and China continues to press for influence. And then there's always instability in the Balkans. You know, we're not done with that. So I think perhaps we'll see more of the same, Senator.
You brought up where Russia hasn't touched many of their capabilities currently, and so they have those in reserve for the next decade. When we look at munitions that are being used, especially in the conflict in Ukraine, and the amount of munitions that are being expended, do you think that we need to increase our production capacity here in this country? And do you encourage our allies to do the same?
Absolutely, Senator, to both. Our allies are very aware of the shortfalls that they have in munitions in certain cases where they do exist.
You were talking about the number of tanks and that our allies have already shared with the Ukrainians.
Right, and so inside NATO, in my role as the Supreme Allied Commander, I've been responsible to deliver a new set of operational plans, and we turned them in on the 14th of April. They're very specific regional plans for collective defense, and they have a level of specificity that's going to drive a force structure requirement, which will be the first time in 35 years that the alliance has a plans-based force structure requirement. This will guide national defense investments across the alliance.
Thank you. General Van Ovost, you talked a little bit about the sea lift and being able to fuel, have that fueling capability. And you mentioned, working with MARAD. Can you kind of focus in, especially on the MARAD point there, on how important that is?
Sure, Senator. We have a great relationship with the Maritime Administration, who oversees our ready reserve force, those ships that are in reduced operating status. And when we need to activate them, they wake up and they come to Transcom and we fight them. So it's really important that we keep that relationship going, and especially when it comes to our mariners, because the same mariners that crew ships that do foreign import and export, they're also the same mariners that are on our gray hull ships. So it's really important that we continue to support them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Fisher. Senator Rono, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here. General Cavoli, China is sending a special representative, an envoy to Ukraine and other countries for talks on regulating the Ukrainian crisis. Not sure what that means. And the special envoy has been selected, and Ukraine is sending a special envoy to China. Do you consider this a significant development, and what does it portend?
Thank you, Senator. I'm not sure we know yet the significance of the development, but what we do know is that China should begin by condemning Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. That should be the first step, in my mind, to any productive role for China in the conflict or its resolution, ma'am.
I think that, yes, well, this also signifies China's engagement in Europe. And so I think that it remains to be seen, but to me, it is possibly a positive sign that perhaps there will be an end to this terrible conflict. General Van Ovost, we have spoken at length about Red Hill and your plan for the fuel currently stored there. I understand there is a plan for where the fuel will go once defueling begins, and with over half the required repairs at Red Hill complete, defueling remains on track to be completed in June of 2024. Is your plan for fuel distribution in the Pacific complete?
Senator, we're lockstep with INDOPACOM and the Navy Task Force Commander on the defueling of Red Hill. We have assets ready to support, and we are on track to meet all of their needs. The posture in the Indo-Pacific is still under assessment. We are in our role as the Global Bulk Fuel Manager for the Department of Defense. We are looking very closely at the posture requirements, the requirements to ensure that we can buy fuel or store fuel, and also what needs to be afloat and what should be in various areas. So we are still doing that assessment. We are working with INDOPACOM on the Section 333 report that should highlight the key aspects of that posture.
So as you're assessing how you're going to complete the safe defueling of the 100 million gallons or so that is at Red Hill, if you require anything further at this time to ensure that the defueling happens in the way that we would want it to happen, will you let me and this committee know? General Cavoli, in war, it is often the most vulnerable who pay the highest cost, the elderly, women, girls. While it is vital that we continue to provide Ukraine with the military equipment, it needs to continue to bulwark democracy in Europe. Our support of the civilian population also speaks to our country's values and stand in sharp contrast with Russia and other malign actors. What is Eucom doing to support and protect the people of Ukraine, and how is Eucom working with Ukraine and other U.S. government agencies to monitor human rights abuse by Russia?
Thank you, Senator. First of all, we support NATO's and other European efforts in this regard. The first one, of course, was the acceptance by our allies of large numbers of refugees who were in the main women and children. They have very successfully done that, and they did it spontaneously. Our initial thought was we were going to have to help significantly, but the societies absorbed them. As they've done so, we've worked with them carefully through non-DOD entities, but advised by Eucom and participated by Eucom to make sure that rights are established. And then as we talk to our Ukrainian colleagues, we do keep our gender advisors and everybody involved as we develop plans with them. The Ukrainians are remarkably sensitive to civilian casualties, of course, because those are Ukrainian civilians who will be inadvertently wounded in their operations. And we routinely in exercises hear even junior Ukrainian servicemen saying, hey, wait a minute, I know people in that town. What are we going to do about this? So it's a complex question, man, but those are some of the things that we're doing to help. We do provide support to those organizations that are attempting to figure out war crimes as well, although we have not put people on the ground to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rono. Senator Cotton, please.
Thank you both for your service and your appearance today. General Cavoli, you testified earlier that 31 Abrams tanks would arrive in Ukraine later in the year. Estimates I've seen say that we're still about 8 months away from that. Is that correct?
No, Senator. The first thing we're going to do is put a training set in.
That starts next month in Grafenwöhr, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then the next set, the dates are moving right now. We're trying to accelerate it as much as we can. It'll probably
Are the same tanks at Grafenwöhr going to be the tanks that go to Ukraine?
The first set will not. Those will be training tanks that we keep, and then we'll send a different set in. We did the same thing with Bradley's earlier this year, sir.
Okay. General Van Ovost, have you received an order to transport that second set of tanks to Ukraine yet?
General Cotton and I work very closely with European Command to meet all of their requirements in a priority manner. Certainly, we are in coordination on the tanks as well as all the other significant equipment.
Is that a no?
We anticipate the movement, so from an order perspective, we're ready to move it.
Sounds like a no. General Cavoli, you look like you have something to say here.
My command has not issued a specific date for movement for those yet. As soon as we have the exact sourcing pinned down with the timeline, we will issue the actual order for the aircraft.
Why has your command not issued that order?
You know, can I take that for the record, Mr. Cotton? Because I'd like to give you the exact status of it.
I mean, our country has thousands of main battle tanks. It would seem like it's not that hard to find 31 and get them there.
Senator, some of the reasons for that I could cover in closed session, but if I could.
I guess, but I mean, I think the main reason for that is the main reasons why we didn't even agree to supply the tanks for a year, which is that President Biden didn't want to supply them. And again, I think we could supply them faster than 8 or 9 months if there was the political will. This is not a decision for you or General Van Ovost to make. I think it's just reflected from the political decision to continue to drag our feet in what we're supplying to Ukraine. It's just a repeated story we've seen over and over again throughout the course of this war. I want to get to one of the potential reasons for that as well. You talked earlier about submitting new O plans for NATO. It came to my attention earlier this year that we have not changed our O plans or our warfighting requirements in Eucom for Russia. Is that correct?
Senator, I'm in consultation with the Secretary of Defense on that question right now. The question has been posed to me, and we're working our answer with the staff. I believe I have a date with the Secretary of Defense later this month or next month to discuss it in detail and to come to a conclusion on what timeline we will or will not adjust plans.
So that's a no then. Once again, that's a no. We haven't changed our requirements in the O plan to fight Russia.
Could we discuss exactly what we've done with O plans in closed session, sir?
Again, we can, but I think the question has been answered now. And the reason I highlight it is the committee is continuously told that by the administration, not by uniformed military officers, that we can't provide this, that, or the other weapon to Ukraine because we need it for our own requirements. I understand that, special requirements in the Western Pacific against China. But if we still have the same requirements in place to fight Russia in April of 2023 that we had in February of 2022, after we've seen the performance of their military in Ukraine and after the known degradation of their military in Ukraine, then I think that's just a pretext that the administration is using for not supplying more capabilities to Ukraine. We can get into more detail in closed setting, but I think it's very troubling that the administration is still stuck in the pre-Ukraine war mindset of what it would take for us to adequately deter or defeat Russia in a conflict in Eucom. One final point I want to raise is the flying of our MQ-9 drones in the Black Sea. Russia dangerously downed one a few weeks back. The reports I've seen and what I've heard from my sources is that we have now altered our flight patterns in the Black Sea, that we are no longer flying in the same airspace where we were flying before that negligent incident with the Russian aircraft. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator. So it was not just negligent; it was not competent. The Russian pilot bumped into the MQ-9, which is not something pilots typically do on purpose. Again, on ISR operations, especially in the Black Sea, I'd be delighted to answer you in detail in closed session.
Well, I asked the Secretary of Defense this recently, and he repeatedly said, we will fly the paths we feel necessary to collect intelligence information.
And those have been his instructions to me.
I understand that, but again, that's not a no when I was asking him that. To me, that's him saying we're not flying where we were anymore because we don't want to be provocative, which again is a political decision. It's not a military decision. And this is not some secret. I mean, Russia knows where we're flying these aircraft. Like anybody here could find out where we're flying them for the most part just by going on open source information. And the fact that If we were flying those aircraft in certain airspace in the Black Sea before that incident, because that's where we thought we needed to get intelligence, and now we're saying we can get that intelligence by flying them somewhere else where we shouldn't have been flying them there in the first place. But if we needed to get them there to get that intelligence in the first place, then we should be back there. Otherwise, we're simply ceding that airspace to Russia. So my time's expired. I guess we'll address more of these in a closed setting.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator Gillibrand, please.
General Cavoli, last year we passed the Justice for Victims of War Crimes Act, improving the Department of Justice's ability to prosecute war crimes committed in Ukraine. However, prosecutors, whether in the U.S. or in an international tribunal, cannot proceed with cases without evidence. How is Eucom working with Ukraine and with our allies to preserve evidence of war crimes? If your personnel discover evidence of a war crime through classified systems, are you ensuring that the evidence is flagged for declassification and eventual use by prosecutors?
Senator, thank you. So we don't have the lead on this question, on this initiative, obviously, but we do support it as requested. And when we find evidence of war crimes, whether in open sources or any other way, we do refer those and we do keep track of it. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The war in Ukraine has allowed the world to observe wartime operations in the cyber and space domains. As a combatant commander in the theater where this conflict is occurring, what have you learned from the conflict about the employment of military forces in the cyber and space domains?
We've learned a ton, both in terms of adversary capability and capacity, Senator, as well as our defensive needs. We're working hard to improve where we need to improve. Most of all, we're working to help our allies defend their networks and to help our partners who are vulnerable also to defend their networks. And we have a very tight cooperation with Paul Nakasone and his U.S. Cyber Command to do this. There are some specific things, of course, that at a classified level would be interesting to talk about. But in general, we have seen a significant employment of cyber, both inside the conflict zone and outside the conflict zone on the part of our adversaries, ma'am.
General Van Ovost, Transcom is turning over responsibility for service members' permanent change of station moves to a private contractor. How will the department ensure that service members' experience actually improves under this contract? How does the department intend to respond if military families' experience worsen rather than improve?
Senator, thanks for that question. We are focused on delivering the quality service, transparency, and accountability that is not existent in the current series of contracts. So we are partnering with HomeSafe, and we have a measured phase-in plan with 28 separate metrics monthly that we'll be reviewing, for which we own the data. So we are going to continue to watch them as they bring on the capacity, as they begin right after peak season, September of 23. And we have a spouses group where we are getting feedback from, actively seeking from them their experiences. So, and our first sample rate is going to be about 50%. So we are going to definitely be understanding how they're bringing on the capacity and are they delivering on the quality that we desire.
Thank you. Part of your strategy for Transcom has involved the increased use of commercial contracts for defense missions rather than military aircraft and crews. Can you discuss how you are ensuring that these contracts are implementing appropriate and aggressive cybersecurity protocols? How are you including cybersecurity in these contracts, and how are you verifying that these contractors are not endangering the security of our military personnel or allies?
Senator, cyber is a consistent discussion point amongst us and our contract or transportation service providers. We are collaborating with industry. We have contract cybersecurity standards to safeguard defense information in those contracts. They annually assess them, and we review those assessments. And we are working throughout the department with Paul Nakasone on sharing and collaboration initiatives with our industry partners. And I appreciate Congress's support of the no-cost cybersecurity offerings offered in the Cyber Collaboration Center and the Defense Industrial-Based Cyber Security Program. Our transportation service providers are taking advantage of these, and we are assessing them almost constantly.
General Cavoli, following up on Senator Shaheen's question and Senator Hirono's question about Iran and China, Can you talk a little bit more about what the impact of Iranian involvement and Chinese involvement in the conflict create, and what recommendations you have to the administration?
Yes, ma'am. So the first complication is diplomatic and political, right? The fact that they don't condemn, the fact that in some cases they affirm Russia's position. Second, Iran, as we noted a few minutes ago, has provided some material support, specifically drones. Those have had an effect. Those do two things. First, when they succeed, they strike targets. And second, they have to be countered, and sometimes they're countered with air defense missiles. And as Chairman Milley and Secretary Austin have made very plain, the primary requirement the Ukrainians have right now is ground-based air defense to control their skies. So it's a cost imposition strategy that you can go after with that. Chinese aid has been non-material. It has not had a direct physical effect on the battlefield yet, ma'am.
Any other impact non-material?
In closed session, I could discuss one specific one, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Senator Rounds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both of you for your service to our country and to your families as well. And thank you also for your teams that are with you today and their families as well for their service to our country. I just want to follow up a little bit. The line of questioning that Senator Cotton began here is one that I think I'd like to understand a little bit more clearly. I believe there were 31 Abrams tanks that were committed to by our country to Ukraine's defense. Are those in that 31, or do those include the training tanks that are already in Europe today?
Senator, there will be 31 Abrams as of right now donated to Ukraine. The training set will be a separate set.
Okay, and so you've got some there in Europe right now. Do you have the 31 identified as being already in Europe, or are they in the United States?
Senator, if I could, I'd like to take that for the record so I can give you the exact location.
Well, I don't need the exact location. I was just curious if they were within your area of operation today in Europe.
Senator, again, I would want to give you an accurate answer, and I don't have it off the top of my head, sir.
It would seem to me that if we've committed for those tanks to be made available, what's the length of time from when you're notified that it's time to deliver them? How long does that take? And perhaps this is a better question for General Van Ovost. How long does it take to actually deliver the Abrams tanks once you've been notified or requested to deliver them?
Senator, we have multiple avenues to deliver Abrams tanks by air or by sea. So we consistently look not just at Abrams tanks, but the significant amount of aid that is being provided to Ukraine. We source that from around the globe, not necessarily just out of CONUS or just out of Europe. And as we determine where the sources are going to be, we match it to the best resource to move it to meet the timelines as needed by the priorities set out by the European Commission.
So you're prepared to make that move as expeditiously as possible once you've been given the orders to transport the tanks?
Yes, Senator.
Where would those tanks be located at today if you were to do them? Can you share that in an open session?
Senator, again, I don't know where all the tanks are and which ones would be viable for this donation. I would leave that up to Army Material Command. And
so it hasn't gotten that far yet?
Not to my awareness it's gotten that far.
All right, thank you. And General, once again, the orders, or at least your authorizations to move tanks over, you'll play a part in that, but you have not been given the authorizations yet to do that at this time.
Right. When the exact tanks are identified and their locations, so they could come from stocks in Europe, as General Van Ovost just pointed out, they could be reconstructed. When I've got the set identified, then I place an order with General Van Ovost, and it usually goes fairly quickly, sir. They can be moved by air or better by sea lift.
I think it's fair to say that we probably have the best logistics capabilities of any country in the world, and that's a testament not just to the men and women that serve within that, but also because we do a good job of planning. I think the reason why I'm following up on this, and I recognize this is not a line of questioning that you really want to go down, but I think it's important to point out that this is not a case of where we just simply can't deliver 31 Abrams tanks. Bottom line is that this has been a policy decision that they're not prepared to deliver 31 Abrams tanks at this time. It is not within your authorization. General, would that be a correct statement on my part?
Senator, there is an intention to deliver the 31 tanks. I think there are some technical things that we have to go through in terms of exactly which tanks that we're working on.
But the bottom line is if we needed those tanks, it shouldn't take 8 months for the United States Army to be able to access 31 Abrams tanks. If we needed them tomorrow, we'd get them very, very quickly. If you needed them, you could get them. Or if you were authorized to get them, you could get them. This is not a case of us not being able to get them. It's a matter that somebody's got to make a decision on when they want those tanks delivered. Is that a fair statement, General?
Sir, I think the key is exactly which tanks and which capabilities, and there are levels of classification that the Army has to wade through on that question for releasability, sir.
Fair to say, though, sir, that should never take 9 months. If you needed those tanks, you could get those tanks.
Sir, if I needed those tanks for the U.S. Army, I certainly could.
Yeah, okay. That is very helpful. Thank you, General. I recognize this was not the line of questioning that I wanted to go down today, but this, I think, is important to understand that those decisions need to be made and that this is not within your area of operation. You're ready to go. You can get it done, but someone's got to tell you it's time to go. And I want to thank you for those very frank answers. I'm mindful that my time is expiring, but I just have to also say, I want to take a moment just to thank you and your staff for resolving an issue that the South Dakota Army National Guard's 129th Mobile Public Affairs Detachment had in getting its meals paid for while deployed in support of Atlantic Resolve. It takes a total force to defend the nation. The Guard is a key component to that force, but sometimes the pieces just simply don't fit together very well. And I want to thank you for going the extra mile to take care of these soldiers, even while tending to the strategic issues that you are responsible for, and I wanted to publicly say thank you for getting involved in getting that fixed for these young soldiers. Thank you,
Senator, my command was wrong in that case, and we appreciate your care for your constituents and for bringing it to our attention, and we're rectifying it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for being here today. I have a question for each of you. First, I want to start with General Van Ovost on the tanker recapitalization plan. The Air Force has modified this approach in order to accelerate the next generation air refueling system, NGAS, and having a modern and survivable tanker plan is critical to any future fight. It's also part of strategic deterrence. And as you know, the Arizona National Guard provides a significant amount of support for rapid mobilization, worldwide deployment, airlift, aeromedical evacuation, and sustained aerial refueling operations for both our air forces and the Navy and partner nation air forces. The 161st Air Refueling Wings fleet is now more than 50 years old, and it remains in really high demand. So, General, what can you share about the Air Force's plan to recapitalize Arizona's National Guard tanker mission, as well as the other Air National Guard units supporting this mission across the country? And what I'm getting at is, what's the plan here, and for Arizona specifically, to get either a KC-Y bridge recapitalization tanker or to continue with the KC-46 until NGAS comes online?
Senator, thanks for that question. Our ability to project and sustain the joint force without fail is a deterrent to our aggressors, and it assures our allies and partners we will be there, and air refueling is the backbone to that. Along those lines, thank you for your support. The total force, we could not do our job in logistics and mobility without the total force, the strength of the total force. I use them every day, so I thank them for their service. As far as the recapitalization, as we work with the Secretary of the Air Force staff, they are committed to a continuous recapitalization program, because when we get the last KC-46 on the current contract, the 179th aircraft, we will still have 287 67-year-old KC-135s. So they have committed to a very targeted modernization program for the KC-135s, which need to last us out into the 2040s to ensure the safety of the airplanes and the survivability of those airplanes out into the future. Meanwhile, they've committed to a continuous recapitalization program with capabilities that are relevant to the KC-46 Block 1, because as they accelerate next generation air refueling system to the left to the mid-2030s, we'll have a gap of 6 or 7 years there where we won't have any production airplanes. So I look forward to their plan. They're doing an analysis of alternatives. I look forward to their plan to continue to seed and recapitalize with all of our air refueling units, because in the end, all of those KC-135s need to be recapitalized.
Okay, could I get your commitment to work with me to ensure that the Guard will receive modernized tankers in a timely fashion comparable with active duty units?
Yes, Senator, I'll work with you and the Air Force on that.
Thank you. Thank you. General Cavoli, it's good seeing you again. We met in Munich, and I just got back from Kyiv a couple weeks ago, met with President Zelensky for over an hour. We had a very productive talk about what he thinks he needs to defeat Russia. And I'm more than ever committed to support Ukraine. We can't let Russia win this thing. You know, last week, Congress was notified of a presidential drawdown authority for more HIMARS, 155-millimeter artillery rounds, and a series of other equipment. And but just for me to get to the point here, in your military assessment, is the equipment that the U.S. and our partners providing enough to pave the way for a decisive victory against the Russians by Ukraine?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for the notes on your recent trip to Kyiv as well. They were very helpful to me. So we went into a planning process with our Ukrainian colleagues last winter, and we developed with them a number of courses of action, wargamed them carefully, and when we came down to the key courses of action for an offensive, we calculated the amount of equipment and the various types that they required, and we have fulfilled that. We have nearly gotten everything into Ukraine, and I am confident they have what they need for the offensive that we have planned with them. And I can go into significant detail in a closed session with you, sir.
Okay, we'll pick it up then. Thank you. Thank you, General.
To it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Ernst, please.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much for, or excuse me, ma'am. Thank you, sir, General Cavoli, for being here today, and General Van Ovost. Thank you very much, ma'am, for coming in front of the committee today. I'm going to start with you, General Cavoli, and a number of my colleagues have raised the issue of Ukraine and Russia, and what we hear in the news, and this has been a hot-button topic with the administration as well, is that we're afraid of escalation. As the war continues to go on, will escalate, Russia will escalate. So General Cavoli, how do you assess the prospect, the prospect of Russia escalating to a point of a nuclear weapons use in this conflict? Can you talk in open session just broadly about what you see, what you've heard, and what would be that tipping point for Vladimir Putin?
Thank you, Senator. It's nice to see you again. And of course, this is a complicated and difficult question. There are an enormous variety of things that go into successful deterrence and successful escalation management. It is something we work on every single day. I am in constant communication with the department, as well as my subordinate commands, as well as our allies, in terms of what we're doing, where we're located, what's happening inside of Ukraine, what's happening outside of Ukraine, to include with my fellow combatant commanders, many of whom have Russian presence in their AORs as well. Successful so far, right? We have managed to control every incident to the extent possible, and I think that's due to a lot of hard work and learning as we go along. With regard to nuclear escalation specifically, ma'am, it's very difficult to talk about in an open session, but I have traveled back to the United States to deliver testimony, so I obviously have a certain degree of confidence that we, the United States and the alliance, are in a good, strong position and deterring such things.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and we hope that we continue on a strong path of deterrence in that area. And with the other assessments out there of President Zelensky's wishes to not only expel the Russians from eastern Ukraine, but also to retake Crimea. What is your assessment of their ability to retake Crimea, and what would the posture be coming from the United States and our partners and allies?
Thanks. The question of retaking any specific piece of ground, depends on a variety of things. Crimea is pretty tough. Crimea's got a mountainous center. But of course, Crimea is pretty hard to keep resupplied if you're the adversary as well. So it really depends on the situation at the time. If Crimea were empty of Russian soldiers, it would be easy. If Crimea were defended at a certain level, it would be harder. And it's hard to see where things go. What we do know is that any such question would be answered sequentially with the activities after the activities that the Ukrainians are planning to undertake in the next months. So it's hard to say from here.
Yeah, thank you very much. And as we look to the future, and I know we don't know when this conflict will end, we hope it would be soon. But General Cavoli, would NATO's military requirements in Eucom increase if there is a political decision to extend a security commitment to Ukraine?
So our posture, the U.S. posture, has shifted over time. Of course, ma'am, in the initial phases, we went up about 103,000 uniform. We've adjusted that over time. We're at about 82,000 in uniform right now, and that depends on what we see going in the AOR, and it's a constant back and forth with the department and the situation. If we were to extend some form of security guarantee to Ukraine, it would clearly depend on exactly what the nature of the security guarantee was. It would also depend, importantly, on what approach our allies took to that. Our allies are increasing their defense commitments. Many of our eastern flank allies, such as Poland, have made massive investments, 3.94% of GDP right now, which exceeds U.S. expenditures on defense. So it depends on what role they would take as well, and that would certainly be our choice, our preference, to have them lead in such a situation.
And I see that my time is expiring, but part of that equation as well, I would like to discuss further at another time, but our continued participation in the state partnership program, especially with a number of our European partners. Obviously, Iowa is partnered with Kosovo. There's a lot of concern with some of those nations as well with Russian influence. So I think they can be an extremely important part of that solution.
Ma'am, I am the biggest fan of the state partnership program.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Ernst. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here and for your extraordinary service to our nation, and to each of your teams, some of them behind you, my thanks as well. General Cavoli, I've been to Ukraine 3 times over roughly the last year plus. I've also, by the way, visited the training area in Grafenwehr, and I have been just immensely impressed, not only by President Zelensky on the 3 occasions that I've spent time with him and everyday Ukrainians, but his military team and our team training Ukrainians, their dedication, their bonding, in fact, in providing the hands-on skill they need to operate the Bradley and Stryker vehicles. And I think it's a great tribute to our military that we have committed in the way that we have, not just at the 30,000-foot level, but literally person-to-person, hands-on in the way that we have. I'm deeply troubled as I view the assets they have and the assets that we could provide. You've just testified in response to Senator Kelly that your belief is that they have what they need to be successful in the counteroffensive this spring in the South and in the East. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Our mantra is that we never want to see a fair fight. Do they have what they need to have an unfair advantage in this offensive going forward?
Sir, they have to be better than the Russian force they face, and there are great weaknesses in the Russian force they face right now. Those weaknesses are temporary, and the Russians will improve their posture and their capabilities over time. But time and the enemies, the Ukrainians' enemies' capabilities is an important factor in this. And
Don't they need more?
I believe that they will have what they need.
Sorry to interrupt. Don't they need more air defense? Couldn't they use planes? What about more of the armored vehicles, even more tanks? Where would you assess the platforms that we can do more to provide to give them greater strength at this critical moment? Because I assume you agree that if this counteroffensive is unsuccessful, it will be a significant setback for the Ukrainians.
Sir, yeah, of course, there are things we continue to give them and that we will need to continue to give them over time. I may have mischaracterized things. We haven't delivered a force and then that's it. We continue to build with them, and we have plans to continue to build with them over the summer and into the autumn, and then eventually we intend to help them restructure their entire military. In the short term, ground-based air defense remains important. We've made some important advances in the last couple of months. I could be very specific about them in closed session, of course, sir, but I feel pretty comfortable about where we are, and I'm comfortable about where we're going in the next couple of months, sir.
What about
an Army can always use more.
Understood. What about planes? What's your assessment?
Sir, they've just received a bunch of MiG-29s from two of our allies. They've begun to employ some of those MiG-29s. They have a few dozen aircraft right now. They are conducting offensive as well as defensive operations with them right now. I think they're key to controlling their own airspace right now, however, is ground-based air defense, as you pointed out a minute ago, sir.
The Washington Post reported yesterday that leaked United States intelligence indicated that the Russians can fund the war in Ukraine for at least another year. Do you agree with that assessment?
Sir, I can't talk specifically to the undisclosed, to the unauthorized disclosures. Clearly, there are investigations going on and everything like that. However, it's important to note that, as General Milley has said on a number of occasions, the Russians have strategic depth. That they have manpower, and that they are not to be underestimated in terms of their ability to endure.
So you don't disagree with the conclusion that they could fund the war for another year, which again heightens the importance of the counteroffensive?
As completely separate from what may or may not be in any documents, and
Right.
I haven't seen. Yeah, no, I think they can fund for another year, sir.
And one last question, sir. Just following up on Senator Cotton's question, you may not be aware, but 4 of us wrote to the Secretary of Defense on March 21, asking that our warfighting requirements in Europe be updated to reflect the degradation of Russian forces, 200,000 or more of their troops killed, significant damage to their armored vehicles, and so forth, because obviously it's a different force than it was when those warfighting requirements were devised. Putting aside the timing, wouldn't you agree in your professional capacity that those warfighting requirements do have to be updated?
Absolutely, when we can assess the exact status, Senator, of the capabilities, the capacity, and the disposition of whatever Russian army emerges from this. Absolutely, we'll update that stuff, and I'm in contact, as I mentioned to Senator Cotton a moment ago, with the department about this. I would point out one or two things, though. You know, the Russian army inside Ukraine today is bigger than it was at the beginning of the conflict. So we have to make sure we got the right side picture, and that's what I'm working on. Separately, sir, I thank you for your visits to Grafenwehr and your kind words about our soldiers and our NCOs who are absolutely putting the ball over the left field fence every day. All components, all three components every day, and I invite all members to please come visit those soldiers at Grafenwehr and see what they're doing for our country.
Thank you.